and ultimately to Medicare. As we speak, Republicans in Congress are working on passing some of the biggest cuts to health care in United States history. As outlined in the House-passed budget bill, Republicans want to slash funding for Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act by more than $1 trillion, cut more than $500 billion in Medicare, and rip health insurance away from 16 million people in the United States. Seniors in nursing homes, babies being born, children getting their shots, all of that will be gone for millions of hardworking families. But it isn't just 16 million people who will lose care. The ripple effect of these health care cuts will drown hospitals, community health centers, and nursing homes across the country. For those living in rural areas, these cuts will have devastating consequences for health outcomes and costs. And it costs jobs and economic success in rural communities. Already, rural hospitals are struggling. In 2023, there were 50 fewer rural hospitals than in 2017. And lack of health care access in rural America is contributing to worse health outcomes. We all know what happens when you kick millions of people off their health insurance coverage. Rural hospitals will not get paid for the services which they provide. And the results of these Medicaid cuts are undeniable, which is why they are so unconscionable. Rural hospitals will face deeper financial strain that could lead to negative health outcomes for the communities which they serve. In order to better understand in detail how rural communities could be impacted by the health care cuts in the reconciliation package, we requested the Cecil G. Shep Center for Health Services Research at the University of North Carolina to share with us their analysis on the financial vulnerability of rural hospitals.
Let's hear it for Cecil.
Today we are releasing that data. What we learned should be a wake-up call to any Republican considering voting for these cuts. Our findings demonstrate that 338 hospitals in rural communities across the country, in red states and blue, are at an immense risk with these Republican cuts. Dozens of hospitals in every state are at risk of financial distress, and this means their communities are at risk as well. If the Republicans' proposals are enacted, these rural hospitals will be at the greatest risk of being forced to stop providing care for new mothers and families, and addiction care, and mental health, and even emergency room care. Some hospitals may have to convert to clinics or standalone emergency centers, or even close altogether. If rural hospitals close, it means that someone having a heart attack will have to wait longer for an EMS. Someone giving birth would have to travel farther to get care. A person in a mental health crisis might get no services at all. And worse, even rural hospitals are often the largest employers in their communities, leaving communities not only forced to grapple with losing health care, but also losing their jobs. Some states have dozens of hospitals at risk, but even one hospital, one community, one person put into harm's way for the sake of a billionaire tax break is unacceptable. These health care cuts are not just callous, but they're reckless, especially doing so without making clear to communities across the country how this will impact them. So we should be absolutely clear with every American about what this means for them. If Republicans want to pass this bill, they should be able to tell us how many hospitals, nursing homes, community health centers will close, what health care services people will lose, and how many people could lose their jobs or their lives from these cuts. But if Republicans refuse to be transparent with the American people about how these cuts will impact them, their local hospitals and their communities will be. Their voices must be heard in this fight. That's why we are releasing this report, to show which hospitals in the country are going to be the most vulnerable. So let me turn now and recognize our great minority leader, Chuck Schumer.
Well, thank you, Eddie. And once again, Ed Markey has done such conscientious, thoughtful, powerful work on any subject he grapples with. You're going to hear a lot of good stuff from Ed Markey, and I'm so proud to join him today. Well, by now everybody knows that the big ugly bill that the Republicans are pushing would decimate our health care system. Certainly Medicaid, but also people on ACA, also people who have private insurance, and now Medicare as well. It would rip away coverage from 16 million people, send health care costs for 22 million through the roof, cut 2 million jobs, and gut funding for hospitals, nursing homes, and other crucial health care providers. And today we're shining a light on another example, a truly horrendous and under-examined part of the Republican plan, the catastrophic effect on rural hospitals. Today we released a report shows that the Republican big ugly portrayal is a matter of life and death in rural America. Life and death. And Senator Markey and I, along with Senator Wyden and more of our Democratic colleagues, have sent a letter to Trump, Thune, Johnson to lay out the facts, the devastating facts, and say to them, it is not too late to stop these cuts. Not too late. The Republicans are trying to put together their bill. The Finance Committee bill isn't done yet. Republicans should make their voices heard. Look at these numbers. And, you know, these hospitals are all across the board, but certain states, red states, are particularly affected. Look at this. Kentucky, more than any other state, 35 rural hospitals closing. Louisiana, 33 rural hospitals being closed. You know, a lot of states have this. Tennessee has 9, Texas has 15. I'm just naming some of the main. West Virginia, tiny state, 7 hospitals closed. So this is across the board in many places. But we say to our Republican colleagues, when these hospitals close next year, and you know they moved up the deadline for these cuts, so that rural hospitals have no chance to survive. Don't come into us. Don't try to shrug your shoulders and say, I don't know why this happened. It happened because you voted for this plan. 200 rural hospitals have closed in the past decade. Rural hospitals don't have the cushion to survive the way a big hospital might with some devastating cuts. 700 rural hospitals, this is 1/3 of all the rural hospitals in America, are at risk closing for the future. And as Eddie mentioned, I've been to just about every rural hospital in New York State. Not every one, but close enough. They are the center of these communities. First, they're usually the largest employer. Second, the only reason small businesses or even larger businesses will come to these counties is if they have decent health care. When an employer comes and asks, should I locate in Wyoming County, one of the first questions the potential new employer is going to ask is, how's your hospital care? Because I'm not going to get people to come here and work. I won't get my executives to come here if there's not good hospital service. So this is so important across the board, but even more important to rural America than it is elsewhere. And so why are they doing this? Why are they killing rural hospitals? This is their own feed corn in their own communities. But the mania to give tax breaks to the rich, the fact that the ultra-wealthy have sort of basically just blinded the Republican Party as a whole to reality and the harm that they are doing to their own constituencies is the reason. And so we're going to fight it tooth and nail. Next week, the House is having a focus on rural hospitals. We know that they will use these great numbers that Cecil has put together for Eddie. And we hope we can change it. We're going to fight and do everything we can to change it. Thank you. We'll take a couple of quick questions on this subject only.
While we're on the topic of the working class and efforts to help the working class, your Republican colleague, Senator Hawley, introduced a bill to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. What is your response to this?
Democrats have always been for raising the minimum wage, and in fact, it's Republicans who've been always beating it back. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for being here.